Today we're going to be talking about upgrading a slow computer using an SSD. And I'll also include a few options that you can try that are free that you can do on your own to see if that helps your computer a little bit. Let's get into it. So to start off, I think it's important to discuss the main differences between a traditional hard drive and an SSD. A hard disk drive like this one works on a very fundamental level like a record player. You have a platter of discs, you can actually make the outline of where the discs are right here, that have information on them, and then there's a little mechanical arm that reaches out and reads the information off of the discs. Most newer budget-friendly computers will use a hard drive instead of a solid-state drive, so they are still extremely popular, and you can get those large capacity drives relatively inexpensively. That's the main reason to go with the hard drive. Now let's talk about some of the drawbacks to a traditional hard drive. Now the biggest difference here is mechanical hard drives have a physical process involved to read your information. Solid-state drives do not. So because there's a physical process going on in here, they generate noise, they generate heat, they're more prone to corruption, especially in laptops, because if you're moving the computer around when that arm is trying to save information or pull a file from somewhere, there's a really good chance that you can damage that. I've had that happen to me twice on a laptop with a hard drive. I've never had any issues with corruption with a solid state, and that's just the nature of the beast. If you have a mechanical process going on, you're more prone to corruption or drive failure. They also use more power than a solid state drive, and most importantly for our purposes today, they're slow. They're really slow. Even the fastest hard drive still can't even come close to the speeds you can get from the slowest, most budget-friendly SSD. A solid-state drive is kind of like a large flash drive, and this technology has existed for a while. However, it's been prohibitively expensive. Only in recent years has the price difference between an SSD and a hard drive been close enough that many people make the justification to spend the extra money on an SSD to get the added benefits, which include, because there's no moving parts, less power consumption, less drive failure, less corruption, less heat, no noise whatsoever, and most importantly, they're fast. They're very fast. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to take out the hard drive in this machine and we're going to replace it with a solid-state drive. Now this upgrade might not be for everyone. They are a little bit expensive. If you wanted to replace this 500 gig hard drive with a 500 gig SSD, that's going to cost you well over $100 right now. However, if you don't use that much space, you can replace your hard drive with a smaller solid-state, save yourself a little bit of money. That's what we did here. This particular computer was only using 70 gigs of this 500 gigs, and that's after 2 years of use. So I'm willing to bet he's never actually going to fill this thing. So we're actually going to get a drive that's half this size, around 250 gigs. So there are a few things you can try without spending a dime. First and foremost, hard drives have the unfortunate characteristic of slowing down as they reach capacity, around 80% or more, and this will vary from drive to drive. Go through all your documents and your music and your photos and just do an overall cleanup. Get rid of as much information as you can. If there's things on there that you want to keep, for example, but you don't necessarily need, I'd recommend offloading them to some sort of external storage device or to a cloud storage service somewhere. Free up as much space on your hard drive that you're using every day as possible. Only have stuff on there that you're actually going to need on a routine basis. I wouldn't use your main computer to just store all of your information. Another thing you can do is remove software. These pre-built machines on this channel, you may notice that we build computers a lot with these pre-made machines. Like if you go into Best Buy and you just buy a computer off the shelf, they often come with what we call bloatware. So essentially when a manufacturer ships a computer to Best Buy or wherever, there's a bunch of software preloaded on the laptop. Hit Control-Alt-Delete, go to Task Manager and see what system processes are going on. It'll tell you what's going on in the background, what's using up your CPU usage, what's using up your memory. On this particular machine, we're only dealing with 4 gigs of RAM. 4 gigs. And while in this machine it is possible to upgrade RAM, that is the most that this is capable of receiving. It won't take advantage of anything more than 4 gigs. Other programs would include outdated drivers, so maybe you had a printer 2 years ago that you don't use anymore. those drivers may still be on your machine. I'd recommend doing this, all of this I would recommend doing anyway before you get an SSD. But another thing you could try is defragmenting your disk. So remember previously we talked about how a hard drive works by reading information off of spinning disks. Well, sometimes when information is saved onto that disk, it separates it into different areas. So the machine has to read half the information in one location and then go to another location to find the other half of the information. And again, because that's a physical process it has to go through, that takes time. Now, when you're reading off an SSD, it pulls that information almost instantly. It doesn't have to do the kind of searching that is required on a hard drive. However, I still recommend doing a defragment if you have a large hard drive with a lot of space being used, because it's going to make the transfer from your hard drive to your SSD go a lot faster. Once it's on your SSD, it doesn't matter whether or not you defragmented, it just makes that transfer time a lot shorter. So you've tried everything, your computer's still not running at the speed you would like, it's time to upgrade from a hard drive to an SSD. And think about it a little bit, see if it makes sense for your machine. Again, if it's time to get a whole new computer, it's time to get a whole new computer, there's no way around that. However, for a lot of machines like this one, this is about 2 years old, it's starting to slow down. This is a perfect use case for an SSD. Instead of buying a whole new machine, you spend $70 on a solid state drive, and you can extend the lifespan, a couple of years easily. How do we do that? Well, first and foremost, you're going to need to move all the information off your current hard drive onto your solid state. Now, this is of course assuming that you've already done all the cleanup that I suggested previously. Once that cleanup has been performed, you're going to need to buy, if you want to do it the way I did it, one of these transfer cables. This particular cable connects on one end with the SATA power and data, and the other end via USB 3. Unfortunately, this machine here doesn't have any USB 3 ports, so we're going to have to be doing this transfer at USB 2.0 speeds, which is unfortunate because even with 70 gigs of information, that's probably going to take a while. So you're going to need some sort of software to facilitate this move. It's not a simple drag and drop. It would be nice if it were. It has to create the partitions that the system is going to read from. I used Macrium Reflect Free, and I was able to do the backup just fine. Some SSDs will actually come with software to make this move happen. So you could do that route if you're buying an SSD for the sole purpose of cloning your hard drive to your SSD. You could actually go online and find cloning kits. They'll come with this little cable. They'll also come with a separate little assembly that you may or may not need depending on the brand of your computer. And it will also be bundled with some premium software to facilitate that move. So that's definitely an option out there. I, however, already had this cable, and I also knew where to find software I can use to do this. So for me, it didn't make sense to do that, but your situation may vary. So once you have the software installed, you create the partitions, you move everything over. It sounds more complicated than it is. Most of the software now is pretty idiot-proof. But once it's finished, eject the SSD from the computer, shut the computer down, and you're going to now replace the drive with the SSD. Now, every laptop is going to be a little bit different. What I'm about to show you is how we did it with this particular machine. A lot of newer ones make this transition very simple. For example, on this computer, you can see that there's one particular flap that you can open where you can make these upgrades. It's held on by 2 screws, which when removed exposes the upgradable components of the computer. You see we have the hard drive here, and we have the RAM here on the right side. And as I mentioned, although you have access to the RAM and technically you could swap this out, this already has 4 gigs, and that's a maximum allowed by the manufacturer. It's not going to take advantage of anything larger than that. Typically, your machine, you likely will be able to upgrade the RAM a little bit more than that, but we're focused on this guy, the hard drive. First and foremost, you have to remove these 2 screws here and here, and then slide the hard drive out of its position, and it has this convenient little plastic tab you can use to wiggle the drive out of position. And you'll see that it's attached in this little assembly by a screw on either side. And it's pretty simple from this point. You just remove the screws from either side, put in the SSD, screw it back in, stick it into the slot where the existing hard drive was, and use that tab once again to pull it into position. And now you just do the same thing in reverse. You put that flap back on there, screw those 2 screws in, and boot up the computer. And I found something interesting about this computer. It actually has a dummy optical drive. If you look on the side of the machine, it looks like it should be able to accept a CD or a DVD. It has a screw on the bottom of the machine that if you remove, you can pull out what you think is an optical drive, but it's not. It's actually just this piece of plastic. Although it has the space for an optical drive, it does not have any connectors to make the connection between the optical drive and the computer. I will now do a side-by-side comparison between the computer before and after the installation of the SSD, and you can see how much quicker it boots up. And this is from a cold start, so I completely shut it off. It's not waking up. It's a complete shut off to the login screen. And as you can see, the SSD finishes significantly sooner than the hard drive. Even opening something like Google Chrome, any application on your computer is going to open a lot faster. Again, this comes down to the fact that there are now fewer moving parts in this machine. It's less likely to break down, less likely to be corrupt. Also, it's going to be using less electricity because the hard drive uses more power than the SSD. I don't know if that's necessarily going to translate to better battery life, but it's definitely not going to worsen your battery life. So as you can see, the upgrade really didn't change anything about the behavior of the machine. You would have no idea. The computer itself thinks it just woke up from a long sleep, really refreshed and extremely fast. Well, that will conclude this lesson on upgrading a computer using an SSD. I'm sure I missed some things, so if you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. It did take a while to get a lot of these camera angles up close and detailed for you guys, so if you appreciated that, give this video a like or a dislike if that's really how you feel. Subscribe if you want to see future videos down the road, possibly some other build videos and other upgrades you can do to your machine. If you're considering buying a new computer, I would highly recommend building your own. You can see how to do that in several of our build videos we've done in the past. It's the most cost-effective way to get the most performance out of a machine is to build it yourself. Again, subscribe to see future content from us down the road, and I will catch you guys in the next one.